Entrepreneurs don't pick a place to start a company. They pick a place to live and they start a company in that place. We'll talk about that today on Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. We are fascinated by the flow of entrepreneurs, where they start their companies. And I think one constant misunderstanding people have, especially at the early stage in the high growth enabled sciences, technology, and companies of the like, is there's this kind of embedded assumption sometimes of like, oh, we have these three things, or, oh, this offering is so good, why doesn't everyone come? And I tend to think they missed the whole point, and that entrepreneurs, like so many of us, want a community first. We're going to talk about whether that's true or not and what it all means. To do that, I'm joined by the CEO of the Arlington Economic Development Authority. I think, Ryan, is that your title? I might have gotten that wrong. What is your title? Sorry, Ryan.
Director of Economic Development. That's all good, man. Don't worry about it.
I hold you in such high esteem, Ryan, that I've already promoted you. That's my first mistake. Ryan, thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here and be part of the Technically community, and with you again, Chris.
Absolutely, and even particularly when I promote you in job titles, and I hold your esteem. So, all right. So, but first, like, call nonsense on me, because this is a line I use a lot. That in my experience and in Technically's coverage, it's always like, well, I didn't find the tax rate was so good, it's why I moved here. They find a community or an identity with a place and they go there, or their spouse or their partner moves somewhere, and then they backdoor their way into, I'm going to start a company here. So first, call nonsense or what on me. Do you agree with the premise that entrepreneurs pick a place to live before they pick a place to start a company?
Oh, I think that totally tracks with what we're seeing here in Arlington, Virginia. And for those that don't know, Arlington, Virginia is just outside. It's in the Washington, D.C. metro area. It's right across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. I think founders want to build companies where they actually want to live. And we certainly feel like we check that box. But what does that mean? It means a community where you can see yourself getting up every day and being part of that outside of your work. So it's being part of your local nonprofit community. It's where you can find, friends and build a family. So, and when you get to the physicality of that, that's walkable neighborhoods, that's vibrant communities. It's a safe place to live. And then also, hopefully it's a business friendly environment to start and expand your business. And so, we've certainly seen the trend occur in two ways. One is maybe someone lives in our region and is starting their company, and then they come and learn more about Arlington, Virginia, and then they want to move their company to Virginia. So kind of interregional movement, which is good. We don't try to actively do that, but we're seeing some of that. And then it's folks who are truly coming from outside. Maybe they've seen something about Northern Virginia that's interesting to them. Maybe they have a spouse that has relocated here and they moved here and then they want to start their business, or in a lot of cases in our region, they get out of federal service or military service. They've lived here because the government's told them to. They've fallen in love with it, and then they start their business. So I definitely think it comes down to, like, can you get up every day and see yourself being in this place? Because you can move your business just as much as easy as you can move yourself. So it's really what's that sticking power of a place that I think is really important these days.
In a piece I just wrote for Technically, I was pulling the census data on the most dominant forces people identify for why they move into a place. And there's a lot of like micro variation in, but on the whole, something like 85% of Americans move any given year for housing reasons, family reasons, job reasons. Those are shifting always, but it comes down a lot to that. And that often can relate to family, as you alluded to. It can be, oh, we're going back nearer to the kids, or we're going back to where the family was, or like my partner got a job, or we're going for the right housing in a given region. We're going to move in region to where the right housing stock is for us, or this is where I grew up. Like that's really it. Like it's much less the kind of like college moves that show up but are a much smaller sliver. Like the big action on moving people is in those three things: housing, family, and jobs. And so one thing that I've been fascinated by is how economic development, the savvy ones, at least in my experience, are starting to think about the relationship to tourism, events and conferences, like classic layers of an economic development pie. But hey, these all things start relating because we actually need you to kind of be here to kind of like learn a little bit about place before you go down. So I guess I'm curious in the Arlington specific case, and then we can widen it for others. How are you thinking about your economic development lane, business talent attraction, relating to other quarters of Arlington or Virginia's strategy around tourism, conferencing? Like, how does that stuff relate to your world and your own sense?
Totally. So we have the benefit here at Arlington Economic Development of having our tourism bureau or visitor and convention services within our department. So we get to connect with that team every day, seamlessly. One interesting thing we found is a few years ago, we launched what's called our tourism brand called All in Arlington. You can find it all in Arlington.
Yeah.
And it was so successful that we've actually been using that as our economic development frame, because it just gets to the point of it. If you need a great place to live, you want a vibrant community, you want an urban area that you can socialize in, build relationships in. We've got all that here. So that's one way we've been kind of blending that tourism and economic development. The second way is something we just did this year, which I thought was really cool. We launched the Arlington Tech Launchpad, which is our international soft landing program. And we brought 16 international companies into Arlington and did a multi-day experience for them. So yes, they sat through a couple of PowerPoints and they learned about Arlington and how to start your business here. But more importantly, they were out in our community, going to restaurants, walking the streets, seeing what's going on in Arlington, and why we think it's a great place to not just start your business, but to live and put roots down here. So we did that this year to great success. We've got a couple of companies who have already started hiring locally. These are international firms, so it's going to take a little bit more time for them to come and plant some roots here. But we're confident that several of those companies are going to end up in Arlington. It's just because our team took the time to showcase the community, and that's what you get when you can combine those tourism and economic development teams together.
We technically survey early stage companies that are on our realist list, security list from our newsroom, and the most recent surveying, we saw this kind of post-pandemic split emerging. That it was true, a chunk of them were increasingly identifying as having fully remote teams. It might be coincidental if they had any coworkers in their home city, which really changes how we, for 16 years, have thought about covering early stage companies. But I actually was maybe at least as interested in the half or more that were saying they were getting the co-working space, or they were, making sure to meet up at events. And it was a cohort of companies that were started after the pandemic that we're still doing kind of a startup ecosystem matters for me. I do want to bump into other entrepreneurs. I do want to be in part of a place. And that for, old nerds like me was comforting, because that cohort was very much a group that could have come back as saying, 95%, we just want to be fully remote. Didn't show up in the data. So I guess I'm curious, how much have you thought your lane of economic development, especially around high growth companies, how much that has changed over the last handful of years, and what still seems very durable for the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Well, here's one thing that hasn't changed. It's the need for community and connectivity. Everybody still wants that. And so whether it's you're doing that 3 days a week and 2 days at home, or 4 days in one, whatever the combination is, or maybe you're just in a different region but still trying to connect into an ecosystem, that need has not gone away. And so what we think the benefit, that we've been trying to cultivate with Arlington and what we're offering is really, really making sure that companies know that there's a huge, young, diverse, highly educated talent pool here, so they can hire locally. So maybe even if you're not in this region, you want somebody from your team to be in this region because there's a lot going on here. Secondly, we know that through our in-person events, people still want to come and partner and meet and get to know other people, whether that's founders or professors from our local universities. So I think, yes, there's no doubt that the kind of traditional sense of I start a company, I have to find a physical space and bring everybody together, that has changed. But what we're seeing, I think, is much more of a mix of companies that are saying, well, maybe we need a little bit of that, but we also just need that connectivity into the ecosystem. And then lastly, I'll say, I think it's fair to say that we've seen some companies that as they have scaled, they've recognized, oh, actually, we do need that physical space.
Yeah.
We've been able to facilitate that from everything from co-working space up to small spec office suites to, hopefully we get somebody who really needs a lot of space and needs a floor of a building. But we're not hanging our hat on that anymore, right? We know the bigger and more important thing is to build a healthy, thriving ecosystem that attracts people and companies, And that's what we're kind of been focused on. We still do a lot of other economic development deals that have to do with traditional office space.
Right.
There's still a lane for that. But like on the tech side, we know that it's more about building those connections within the ecosystem. That's where I think we lay the groundwork for future results.
Are you seeing the lines blur a bit? By which I mean, this is stuff we've been talking about for years, but I think I'm seeing it in other reporting I'm doing of, oh yeah, everyone has some sort of tech-oriented team, however that team is describing it, because it ranges a lot. If it's actual software build or if it's a kind of data science team, it can mean a lot of things. If it is a little like spec unit around AI, or like skunkworks around something like that, are you seeing that kind of evolve? And or similarly, we're watching like tech startup, that phrase, I think, happily be stretched. Sciences are showing up much more in conversations we're part of. Robotics, advanced hardware, existing companies needing to retrofit and add in more. And so like, in some sense, there's just the old idea of like tech kind of eats itself. Like tech is not an industry. It'll keep being like an approach to the world. Is that kind of showing up, and is that challenging how you think about your own work and how you might advise other regions about what a tech strategy might look like? It could be a lot bigger than you might imagine in the past.
Yeah, I think that you have to take a broad view, because if you just say we're going to focus on 3 industries and only 3 industries, you're going to miss like a ton of other stuff that might be happening in your community. So yeah, while we do a lot around defense and aerospace and cybersecurity and some other industries that have a strong foothold here in Northern Virginia, we are talking to a lot of different companies, and we're open to programming for a lot of different types of industries, because we don't want to miss out on a cluster that might be coming together, or a group of entrepreneurs who have spun out of a George Mason innovation campus and are looking at doing something in robotics or energy or something. So you've got to be kind of open to what that label could mean, because I think that's how you make sure you just something doesn't pass you and you miss it.
Well, super well said. Maybe Ryan, I got to move on here in a sec, but linger on that for a second, because like I know you and team really use the ecosystem metaphor seriously, and not everybody does. But that ecosystem metaphor is supposed to mean something. It means you have different size species. It means that you can't necessarily like economically plan everything, and you might be surprised. We have reported on all sorts of examples of the region or the state that had their 3 clusters on a PowerPoint presentation that they present, and this is what we focus on. And whoops, the tech unicorn that popped up has nothing to do with any of them. And they kind of often like, well, if you kind of squint, it could be sort of fit under this umbrella. But that isn't a problem. That's a sign of health, that if you have a lot of smart people bumping around, you might be surprised by what they create. So how do you have, you both have to present strategy. You, of course, have to have industry clusters. This is what we learn. This is why we're planning. But how do you also be responsive for, didn't see that coming, but let's run with it? How much is that coming up in your work and strategy?
Oh, certainly, all the time. I mean, my favorite thing is when somebody plants a flag and says, we're going to be this now, like this. And it's like, you don't have that even, like, you're going to build that from scratch. Like that always gets me laughing, because I like, these things take time. And you've got to be open to kind of the fundamentals of what helps to build what we overuse the word ecosystem, right? And so for us, we know we're not, for example, we did some like seed funding of companies. We've actually moved on and put more of our money into kind of events and things that can help bring people together and connect people, because we're not forming the companies, the entrepreneurs are. So we're just trying to kind of set an environment where they can make those connections. They can, find those partnerships to help build their company. And that, I think, is the role of economic development, particularly in this tech startup area. Like, we need to be helping to facilitate, not trying to engineer something into existence.
So one last lingering point on there, and I'll go to like kind of a closing point. But to bring us back to the prompt of how, any given entrepreneur should think about where they move. And so, and for me, that use case is, I just found out my partner is going to graduate school somewhere and I have to move to, and I want to start a company. Can I do it there? Or I'm just looking for a fresh start for where I am. Or I want to just go back home. And so I'm poking around. I think rationally, and I've talked to enough people that this is a real thing. Someone might say, oh, well, I'm starting an XYZ company and this place over here put a flag in their ground and said they are focusing on XYZ company. If you're just talking to an entrepreneur at the airport bar, what's your guidance on how you balance I wanted to start this and they said they'd focus on that. What's kind of like some of your thoughts at the airport bar?
Well, I think it gets back to your first comment about how do you choose where to live? How do you link kind of getting to know a place? I would say take, to the extent an entrepreneur can, take time to go visit a place. If you go there and there's no meetups, there's no events, there's no partners, there's probably not a great environment for you to start your business. But if you do go and you find that, hey, man, we've got an economic development team that's really trying to foster and facilitate connections. We've got separate meetup groups. We've got universities that are running programs and doing things. Then once you see that activity, I think that's a good sign for you to say, hey, I should probably spend a little bit more time here and maybe make my investment here. And then you get into the things longer down the road about what's the business friendly environment, what's the tax structure, that'll all come. But I think you got to go and think and just try to experience it for yourself. And I like to think that we're doing that in Arlington, whether it's through our community planning and our neighborhoods and what we're trying to create as a sense of place, all the way up to how are we trying to help facilitate the expansion and growth of our local ecosystem, and then plugging that into our regional ecosystem. And I think that's what our mission is kind of focusing towards. And it's really great that we're seeing the buy-in from our local community leaders that say, hey, no, this actually might be a long-term play, but it's something we need to be investing in. So if you see that in a community, kind of consistent investment, that they're talking about things over years and years, not just they don't just have like a landing page for it. I think that's when this is the place that I should spend some time and maybe invest my capital in. So that's how I would say over a beer at the bar how they should look at it.
I do like be wary of the paper thin web page. I think that's right. All right, I'm going to lose you here. So send me off with one last thing that I'm bumping into around the country: regionalism. I think understandably, folks have to carve this up very differently. Certain places, it's got to be a statewide strategy. Over here, is it regional? Are we cross jurisdiction? Are we at the county level? Just talk to me a little bit. Arlington's thrived as kind of its own independent animal, but I can attest, you more than most I meet very intentionally, very seriously talk about a regional strategy, cross jurisdiction. I've seen it. What's your advice to others, both for the entrepreneur, how they should think about an ecosystem and what the boundaries are, and even maybe you and your tribe, how are you guys thinking about that idea of regionalism as it continues to evolve?
Yeah, it's always a work in progress. We're a little bit competitive here in Northern Virginia and the DMV. A lot of Type A personalities that like to be the first on things. But what I'm seeing is the kernels of some potential regional wide ecosystem development with other communities who are doing things like we're doing. And then I think the next phase or evolution is going to be, how do we start connecting some of this stuff together? And there are mechanisms for us to do that across both Northern Virginia and across DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I think that's something that economic developers on a whole need to be focused on. And I think that's good because, if we're healthy and thriving and DC is healthy and thriving and so on and so forth, that means our region is. And I'm never sending my business development team out to go poach another startup from a community next to us, right? Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. The health of all of our communities means that our region is stronger. So I think we're seeing some of that. I'm optimistic that there's some really great programs happening in places like DC, Prince William County, Fairfax County, and many others in our region, that I think if we can tie some of this more together, that's only just going to help us all rise and succeed together.
Ryan, well said. I'm going to leave it at that. Ryan Touhill, the head of the economic development team in Arlington,
That's
Virginia.
Right.
But my pick for any promotion he wants, I always appreciate the conversation, Ryan. Thank you for that. That's this week's Builders Live. We'll see you next time. Bye, friends.